Sometimes people ask Simcha, me, what was the role of grace in your shift, in the process of you becoming what you have always been, this oneness, this all-nothingness that you express right now. So what was the role of grace? How did it help you? How did it come to you? What did you do that deserved the character to receive this enormous grace? And by asking this question, they show the paradox of not understanding what is grace and what is this state of being self-realized. Because there is no difference between these two words. Basically, being enlightened or being self-realized or becoming this thing is the same as grace itself. Grace itself is this oneness, and you can call it whatever you choose to call it. If you choose to call it God, but pay attention not to restrict yourself to your prior beliefs. And when you say God, try to imagine something less judgmental. This grace, this enormous thing, is oneness, is all nothingness. It is always the only thing that is. This is what we are. We are this holiness, quietness, nothingness, blissful state or unstate, non-existence. This is what we are. We are this grace. Everything you see around you and everyone you meet is this enormous grace, just walking by your side or just sitting in a coffee house near your house and sipping his coffee, or it's a dog barking. This is grace. This is what it looks like all the time. It surrounds us so beautifully. We don't notice that this is grace itself. And we don't understand that we are this grace itself. And so we believe that for the separate form, us, the character, to shift our perception to become this thing, we must receive this grace from somewhere else, from where it is. And humanity believes that this grace is like some kind of power detached from the separate form and is somewhere, maybe in the sky. Maybe you think it's all around us, but you think it's like an energy. It is inconceivable to the mind that this grace is this ordinary existence. So we make the division. And by making this division, we detach ourselves, from this grace. So when you ask what is the role of grace in this process of spiritually being enlightened or self-realized, you are basically asking what is the role of me becoming me. You are already you. Nothing can change that. Never. It cannot change. This is what you are. And you may understand it in your mind, and believe me, but you don't know it. So the mind grasps this idea, this fantastic idea of something other than this ordinary existence, to be grace, to be this thing that is not us, and it's more powerful than us, and it has the qualities of divineness, which is pure, untouched, unseen. And it's so confusing, because this belief that grace is this holy thing, energy, something that we cannot perceive in our eyes, makes it something unapproachable. We cannot use this grace. We cannot influence this grace. We cannot touch this grace. It is independent and it has his own will, and if he wants to, this great grace, this God, he will help this separate form. So we make this, humanity makes this impossible division between it itself and misses out the opportunity to embrace grace wherever it is, which is everywhere, which is everything. And by not accepting grace around us, rejecting grace, expecting grace to be somewhere else, detaching ourselves from grace and expecting it to have its own free will, we take the power from ourselves to influence ourselves in our progress in this spiritual path. Because we want to progress, to evolve, to become this amazing state, to become what we are. We understand it in our minds. But this gap between us and the world that surrounds us, this gap doesn't allow us to make this progress. So grace is another name for us. We are grace itself all the time. We are everything and everyone all at once, and we are this great grace that we think is detached, is not us, is divine. So when people ask, Simcha, what was the role of grace in your shift? The answer is, she was grace itself all along. The only thing that allowed grace to fully express itself like it does right now in Simcha's character, in her daily life, the only thing that made the difference is the character's behavior, or Simcha's behavior, what she did, how she acted. So to earn this amazing grace, you have to become grace itself in your life. You have to act in the highest, most compassionate way that your character allows you to do. And slowly but persistently to widen the borders of your ability to express grace. What Simcha did was to express grace in her actions as a character. We don't have historical stories. Not everyone is a main character. Of course, we are all the main characters of our book, but we live humble lives, ordinary lives, surrounded by ordinary people and circumstances. So it's not like Simcha became a different character in her story. No, she remained Simcha. And her options of being grace were limited to the process of living as this character. So people might think it's very mundane. How can I express grace to my co-worker or my children or the people in my community, which sometimes I really don't like, simply don't like. So how can I express grace? Grace has to be something majestical and powerful and out of this world. It is out of this world. And grace is not out of this world. Grace is this world. So when Simcha became grace in her world, in her mundane, simple, small and narrow world, she did that inside this world. She didn't look for something greater to express grace. You can express your true nature, which is grace, under any circumstances and in any state. So what she did was to become grace itself by acting in her world. This is how grace redeemed her character. It's not the other way around, that you do something and you wait for grace to come from somewhere and join you. You are grace itself, and it will only help you. You will only help yourself if you allow yourself to be who you are. And being who you are is expressing grace, and expressing grace is expressing the highest qualities you have as a human being and acting very firmly in your life to make your reality better, to grow, to evolve, just like nature always grows, changes, blossoms. Grace inside your life wants to express itself, wants to grow, wants to blossom. So becoming what you are is just something that you have to do yourself. Grace did not come to Simcha because grace was always Simcha. How can grace come to itself? Grace is wonderful. We are wonderful. It is very compassionate, very humorous. It is not judgmental. Grace is soft, so soft. It's like being a mother to everything. The love of a mother to a child is grace. And expressing this love to the world around you is the way to become this state itself without the interruption of the psychological structure of the separate form. Simcha became grace itself because she was always grace itself. The only difference is that there is a belief, an idea of a separate form which talks right now. The absolute reality is that nothing happens right now. This grace has always been so quiet, so relaxed. And now she can express these qualities of grace in her narrow, small world, without the burden of the psychological structure of the character which suffered. And this is the only shift that has happened. Spiritual enlightenment doesn't happen to a person. It's not that the person is being redeemed and saved, and from now on this person will be happy and know who he is. This person, you, Simcha, never existed. This is the revelation that we are this grace, that we are everything around us, that we surrounded ourselves with ourselves, that we have always been here and will always be here. And nothing can touch this thing. Nothing can touch us. This is what we are. And Simcha was walking in the world for 45 years without this knowing and suffered, but she acted in a way that is very, very similar to the way grace itself works. She was simply good to her surroundings. She was nice to the animals. She was nice to other people. She tried to help whatever she can. Becoming what we are, becoming this grace, cannot happen by expecting it, by praying to it. Oh, please, dear God, if you can hear me, save me, come to me, show yourself. Okay, what can I say? I show myself to myself all the time. What more do you want me to do? How much clearer can I get? I show myself, and when I say I mean God, grace, because I know what I am. I think you don't know what you are. So I allow Simcha to talk in this manner. So I say, I show myself everywhere, all the time. I am with you all the time. I am you. I cannot be more simple than in transforming this message of what I am. It cannot be done in a more easy, simple, relatable way. I am not hiding anywhere. I am not somewhere out of your reach. You should not pray to grace because I am here. I am you. I am everything you see around you. I arranged it. So we arranged it so, because grace is all this oneness. We arranged it so that we will be very, very open to this view of ourselves, of what we really look like. Just look at me. Look at Simcha. Look at yourself in the mirror. Look at your guitar. Look at your table. Look at your trees. Look around you. Look at the people. Look at your mother. Look at what is around you. I am it. I am this great grace. You want me to come to you? I come to you all the time. I am with you all the time. You do not acknowledge me. You do not acknowledge what I am. You insist on this separation between us. Why? If you want me so much, why don't you accept me? Why don't you just look at everything around you and yourself and treat it like I would? I am you. How can my expression, Grace's expression, be full or express itself if you do not do that? You are my only instrument of doing that. You. I do not work alone. I do not come from somewhere else. I am you. If you want me to come to you, you cannot. I'm already you. You must allow yourself to acknowledge that by acting and understanding that you are grace itself. You can only show your glory, grace's glory, by your actions. So if you do not do that in your life, in your immediate surroundings, if you do not play the part of grace in your life, it will not be played. It will not come from anywhere else. You are, it seems, like a very small part in a very large world, and so many stories you can hear, and you can say, oh, that place received grace, or this person received grace, or something happened in, oh, thank God. But everything you see around you, all your reality, is only restricted to your point of view. This is your world. It's only one world. Your ability and point of view to perceive this oneness. So each act of grace that you can hear about in the news or in stories is yours. As hard as it to believe it, it is yours. Every small act of grace you do in your life affects the world in so many different amazing ways. It's your story, it's your development, and the further you go along this way, you will help the world around you, and you will help yourself. Acting is so important. It is not a passive thing. Grace is not a passive thing. It's not waiting, it's not wishing. Nothing happens from wishing and praying. The only power prayer and wishing has is that it motivates you to act. Just by praying itself, nothing will happen. It can only change something in you, and something will change and something will happen. And it's not that somewhere, someplace, some God decided to help you. It was you who, by praying, understood what you wanted, what you needed, and then somehow this intention helped what you wanted. But this is the only function prayer has. Just like a laser focuses you on what you need, and then things can happen. If you want grace, ask yourself, I don't mean a question, I mean permission. Ask yourself, give yourself the freedom to express what you are. You are grace itself. You are this almighty power. This is unbelievable but true. This is what we are. We are this great grace. And if we want it, the only thing we can do is to allow ourselves to be ourselves by expressing it. And expressing grace is all the things you know and believe that grace should do. But because you are a separate form, like a character, do that in your own way, in your own instruments, in your own qualities. Affect your immediate surroundings as best you can as grace. Play the part of grace. The shift happened to Simcha after years of practice and not meditation or prayers, practice of giving, of being there for others, of giving herself. Getting stronger by this knowing that when she gave something to someone, she became stronger. She understood that. She understood the mechanism. She knew she was doing so well for others and that they are happier and she is stronger, and everything was building so much power inside the separate form, the character. And when the final shift happened, it was after a very intensive week in which she acted. It's hard because she's talking about herself, but it is true. She was very, very, very compassionate, active, and she would act in the highest possible way to help, to become this thing. And it was grace itself. Wherever she was that week, she brought so much power, so much quietness, so much aliveness, so much acceptance, so much willingness to help. And she did that in the character. And she did that even though she suffered. So after this week, when she reached the highest potential of her being able to give. Nothing was left. She did everything right. It was like she cleaned a very messy table and wiped it, and now it was shining. Nothing was left, not a speck of dust, nothing. And then the most natural thing happened. It's not that there was a barrier and it fell down. This is not the process of being spiritually enlightened. It's not a jump over something. It was so natural for the character to become what she is, because she already was this thing. She understood what she was all along. She didn't need to ask anything. She knew. It is an instant knowing, yes, this is what I am, this is what I've been doing so far. So now I know without the character, and the character was erased. And this is the shift, becoming what we are. This is why it's very natural and very easy to become this state, to become grace itself. So there is no difference between spiritual enlightenment and grace. It's the same thing. It's the same essence, state. We are this state. We are already enlightened. We are already grace. If we want grace to help us, it's very simple. We should help ourselves.
Nothing good, nothing bad, nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing stillborn or lost, nothing further than